Lazarus AFK. Written by Lasse Sagromalver. Narrated by Lasse Sagromalver. But will our philosophy not thus become a tragedy? Will truth not become harmful to life? Human, all too human. Chapter 1. Some months ago I went on a journey that brought me to the edge of the preacher's pulpit. This is a cliff in Norway with a drop of more than 600 meters, which I deemed to be sufficient. It was a damp and drizzly Danish November, and I found myself to be much in the same state, metaphorically speaking, for a rather longer time than I cared for. I therefore thought the preacher's pulpit an appropriate solution to the current state of things. Furthermore, there are extremely strict gun laws here in Denmark, no mountains, and trains I find a rather too messy and public affair. It may come as a surprise to some that one does not simply dispatch of oneself. Most attempts actually fail. Men succeed more often than women, but our success rate is still rather dismal when looking at it from a misanthrope's perspective. But my philosophy, so far as I actually have one, is that if you aim to kill yourself, you better do it properly. No botched attempts and then limping about miserably for a score of years more. Haha, no sir, not me. I do not fear death, I fear suffering. So after having done my research and finding a rather useful website, which even went as far as providing statistics on the success rate of various methods, I deemed a frisky jump from a sufficient height the best available option for me. I discovered that the preacher's pulpit was only a train trip and a short voyage upon the waves away, and its height should allow me to reach my body's terminal velocity. The cliff had even proved fatal some years ago by a similarly minded person, so in truth I could with some confidence rely on a successful outcome to my journey. But do not take me for one of those preachers of death who pronounce the vanity of all things. I'm an optimist when it comes to life in general, but my own life is an entirely different matter, and I permit myself the liberty to keep or disregard it at my own discretion. Nothing is more tiresome than those sick grinning men who take pleasure in their unrelenting pessimism. Stop having children, seize all life, consciousness is a curse, they cry, dividing the world in two, the optimists and the pessimists. If you think you belong to the group of pessimists in this way of splitting the world, you are most likely wrong. Membership in this group requires that you unconditionally abhor existence, that you chant, "There is no hope," and that you believe the best thing that could happen is the extinction of the whole human race. From their own miserable pathological existence, filled with anxiety and depression, they create a philosophy which is pathological throughout. They observe other people's happiness and conclude that those smiling people must be deluded. Vengeance upon life is what they most wish for. They do this by performing a leap of darkness, pronouncing that life is awful for all creatures, and that this will always be true and has always been true. The greatest enemy is the person who feels an affinity with them and understands their worldview, yet still believes in human existence. The logical outcome of their philosophy is quite obvious to anyone, yet their mole-like nature is too blind to see this. If it is better not to be, and there's nothing to remedy this, the only acceptable and wise thing to do is end one's life. Denying this argument requires the same sort of delusional logic they so scorn in the optimistic philosophers, who for them is any philosopher who offers the least passage of light through the dark moldy curtain they try to cover existence in. Yet I am in a way a pessimist. I deny life, but I make no grand statements about the whole of humanity. I have simply come to realize that it is better for me personally to stop breathing. Know thyself is the injunction of the ancients, and I have achieved knowledge of who I am. Now that I know myself, I have chosen to delete that self. Only my will remain. Wait, that doesn't make much sense. When the self goes, then my will follow. That isn't much better. Well, you know what I mean. Only the bones will be left, though they too will disintegrate at some point. The first thing I packed for the journey was condoms. But Lazarus, you cry. Or you would if you knew Lazarus was my name. You're about to kill yourself. What care you about safety? Well, there are two states I want to be in. Health or death. And you never know what opportunities might present itself on the journey. Due to human infirmity, I also could not be sure that I might not veer from my purpose at the edge. So better stay healthy until I'm sure I will be no more. I also thought about bringing a knife, because with such an useful tool I could make a few incisions at various appropriate places before jumping. This would be a sort of dual insurance that the journey would actually be successful, and that I would not merely cripple myself, since there are instances of people who survive a fall even from an airplane. I had, however, serious doubts that I would be able to wield the knife against myself, so I thought it better to trust in providence and the force of a human body falling with terminal velocity. Contrary to popular wisdom, I also neglected to pack a towel. I find them rather overrated for traveling purposes. Having packed the various trivial necessities required, I set out upon my somewhat epic journey. I proceeded to walk to the station, which was located a few kilometers away. But who should I chance to meet on my peripatetic journey but Sven, my only brother, engaged in jolly cooperation with his fellow human creatures. He was sitting outside a restaurant, playing some board game with a mixed company of a dozen or so. Having espied him, I quickly changed direction and sought another path to reach the station, hoping that the dizzying mess of humans had concealed me. It was too late, however, and he caught up with me, puzzled as to why I was trying to avoid him. "Do you not recognize your own brother, Lazarus?" he said, while grabbing my shoulder and turning me around. "Oh, hello, Sven," I said. "Yes, I recognized you, but I'm in a hurry right now, and I have no time to talk. And besides," I said enigmatically, "you are not my keeper." "I don't know about that, but why are you wearing that large backpack? Where are you going? What are you about to do?" he said with concern. I proceeded to tell him some lie to make him disengage me, but while I was speaking he noticed my red eyes and knew I was not telling the truth. He became serious. "You're going away, aren't you? And without telling me about it?" After some hesitation and more feeble lies, I finally confessed that I was going to the preacher's pulpit in Norway, on a short 2 or 3 days trip to "enjoy the scenery," as I put it, and take a small break. Having already seen through my deception, and knowing that I had a melancholic disposition, he exclaimed that he would follow me, and we would make a happy trip together. Even though I knew resistance was probably futile, I still persisted in making him desist in his plans, but to no avail. He told me that if I didn't wait for him, he would follow me directly to the station and board a train with me. "Fine," said I finally. "I will sit over there at the river and wait for you. You got 45 minutes to pack your stuff and come back here." He looked at me suspiciously. "If I leave you, you will just take off and board the train alone. I know you, brother." I exclaimed that I would never do such a thing. He was my brother, my own flesh and blood. How can you not trust your own brother? I swear on all that is holy and unholy that I will wait here for 45 minutes before leaving. I managed to convince him of my honest intentions, and after having shaken hands, I went over to a small stone pillar close to the river and sat down upon it. It is curious that these past 4 years I have lived in Aarhus. Every time I have been at this river, which flows through the center of the city, I have always wanted to throw my stuff into it. Yet so far practical concerns have always checked this unaccountable impulse. But, thought I, what have I need of anything other than base money on this one-way trip? This is a perfect opportunity of freeing myself of the tyranny of both keys and phone. For what are keys but the material proof that we all share Hobbes' view of the common infirmity and wickedness of our fellow citizens? What is the click of the lock that accompanies the just departed guest but an accusation? Why does the person who has dropped some precious object in the grass look more often at his supposedly benevolent helpers than the ground? And is it because we are all secretly sun worshippers that the streets are empty at night? Perhaps it is because every man truly is a wolf to every other man, that most of us never have the time to acquire knowledge of the face of the earth, and few even dare to dive into its cold depths. But enough of this, the river flows and I still have a long way to go. Looking up and around the sprawling city, I saw humanity appearing to get along well enough. So I stood up, took my keys out of my pocket and said, "I refute you thus, Hobbes," and threw them into the river. And what does my phone say about humans and human nature? Well, Hobbes doesn't really aid me here, but no matter. The phone is a symbol, or is it a metaphor, or both, of how much we like to talk to each other. Yes, that is it. And you who wish to speak and instruct me, where were you when the foundations of the earth were laid? You cannot answer? So much for your understanding. Down the river it goes. This was a trip that I did not wish to bring my brother along, and I had therefore no intention of waiting for him. I thought it probable that he might take a few steps away and watch me a bit before he left, to make sure that I would actually wait. I reckoned that the sweet spot would be 20 minutes, because at that point he would surely have left if he had been observing me. If he on the other hand had left straight away, I would still have some time before he would be back from his apartment. But Lazarus, you say, you gave him your word, you swore and shook hands. If you leave now, you are false, and nobody, least of all your faithful listeners, will believe the truth of a word of what you are saying. Well, I say, let the person amongst you who has never told a lie be the first to throw accusations of falsehood at me. And what, I ask, is truth anyway? God is dead, etc., and thus everything is permitted and so on. And so I crouched down towards the river and washed my hands of the whole affair, though the water was in truth pretty damn foul. Onwards to the station, for death waits for no man. Unfortunately, the quickest way for me to take was through the crowded pedestrian zone. When navigating in such an environment, you have to deny the humanity of others to some degree. Sometimes I have to keep my eyes fixed at the ground, just to keep the ocean of faces, identities, lives and stories from continually assaulting my consciousness. If the humans around him reach a certain mass, a sane man conceptualized them as trees. It becomes like walking in a forest. A homeless beggar becomes part of the forest, and you take no more notice of him than you would a fallen tree. Yet today I was not feeling sensitive and reserved, so I let curiosity of my fellow human beings rule my sensual perceptions. I navigated through the crowd towards my destination, looking boldly at the faces of people continually walking towards me, trying my best to avoid falling in love with every pretty girl I saw. Occasionally I had to suffer overhearing remarks such as, "Look how many persons are here, it is like an ant hill," from someone whose idea of a good time with the family is to go shopping in Aarhus on a Saturday and then proceed to complain about the enormous amount of people in the street. But generally the experience is enlightening, though exhausting. I often wonder how much a quick glance of a face can reveal of a person. It has become almost an obsession of mine to analyze faces and deduce character. I believe an experienced observer can deduce a person's character and being from just a few seconds study. I suppose this is the definition of being superficial, yet it is in truth not superficial at all. I did not have to wait long for a train to arrive, and presently I was comfortably seated in a modern industrial machine of mass public transportation. Despite my goal of non-existence, I was temporarily satisfied with my current state of being. I had secured a window spot, and I was pretty certain I faced in the direction the train would be going in. But such a satisfaction with existence does not last long, and soon enough the hours press in upon one's consciousness again. I sat with my eyes closed. After long deliberation I had finally decided to head out, to put my plan into motion, and now here I sat. There was not anything remarkable that made me suddenly decide to go to the preacher's pulpit. It was more a case of malaise slowly accumulating, something which I had been thinking about for a long time finally coming to fruition. As I sat there in reverie, musing upon my impending doom and my own death before my father's, someone grabbed and held my hand. I half jumped in my seat and tried to wrest myself away from the rogue who had imposed himself on me in such a way. "So you thought you could fool me by cooking up your lies for me," I heard the voice of my only brother Sven say. I knew you probably would not wait for me, though I cannot discern why. He looked both puzzled and smugly satisfied with himself. I decided to tell the truth, and as I did so, tears started to well up in my eyes. After having explained my purpose, I tried to dissuade him from following me any further. "I'm about to die, Sven. What use have I of you? Where I am about to go is not a place for you. Only death awaits there." His demeanor had changed and was now serious. "So you decided to commit suicide? It does not surprise me that you have come to such a foolish conclusion," he said calmly. I explained that as a rational human being with agency, I was free to decide whether to live or not, and concluded with insisting that he should leave me this instant before the train departed. "Sure, you are free to kill yourself, and I am free to use my agency to accompany an attempt to persuade you from carrying out your foolish notion." And so there were two. Chapter 2. Our first destination was Hirtshals, a small town situated close to the top of Jutland. From there we would take a ferry to Norway, to a town as close to the preacher's pulpit as possible. After the train had left, we did not speak for some time. I was, however, aware that my brother would demand an accounting from me, and that I would have to justify why I was doing what I was doing. The problem with this, however, was that I was not sure I knew entirely myself, and There were also the risk of contagion. Oh, you who are happy and content, who have arrived and are living in the promised land, think before you start turning every stone and begin digging deeply in the ground. You might find the bones of forgotten men, and what is even more terrible, forgotten ages. But you are not butterflies. If you were, you would have left me already. No, you are a moth, and right now I'm starting to build a fire in the dark. Are you going to stick around long enough and risk getting burned, perhaps even consumed? Yet maybe I will not manage to light a fire, and my wisdom will be but a few sparks from my own flint, and nothing will be set alight. Or perhaps my supposed wisdom will be nothing but a will-o'-the-wisp in the swamp, who will lead the exhausted but inquisitive traveler dangerously astray. You may even yourself be considering taking the final shortcut, and this may make you pause in your decision. My tale in the dark swamp may then be a sort of catharsis, and the swamp that I am leading you into will finally appear to open out into the promised land. So I suppose that you would like to know my reasons for going to Norway, and why I am, so to say, preaching a message there, I said, turning to my brother, who was reading some magazine they supplied on the train. The woman on the cover was sticking her tongue out at me, which had been bothering me since I first noticed it. Even though we have not spoken much these past years, I still think I have a general idea, but I would like to hear your own justifications for doing so, he said, putting the magazine back into its holder. So tell me, Lazarus, why would such a handsome, clever young man as yourself commit suicide? I don't know how to start, I said. The train was out in the country now, going through a monotonous landscape with only occasional patches of forest. It was overwhelmingly dominated by the evidence of the labor of man and its transformation of the earth. Line upon line of rye flowed by, field followed by identical field, all swaying uniformly in the wind. And so the Lord commanded, your food shall be the grasses of the field. In pain shall you bear children, and the ground shall be cursed because of you. Go forth and multiply and conquer the earth. Conquer, and then proceed to kill the earth and all that dwells on it. And this also, said I suddenly, has been one of the good places of the earth. Not before man came, no, we don't have to go that far back, but before a certain kind of man came. I can't tell you what it is exactly. Maybe capitalism is to blame, maybe not. Perhaps we should put Christianity's God on trial and ask him why he ruined this world. And now when we have stopped believing in his world, there's nothing left, we lost both worlds. No wonder I had this will to nothingness. I paused and looked at my brother. He had his hands piously folded and was paying attention to me, hearing my confession against life. You know, Sven, it's a commonly held misconception that Nietzsche was a nihilist, but that is completely false. His whole life was engaged in a struggle against nihilism, an affirmation of this life. It is truly a wonder he didn't kill himself with the amount of physical, social, and mental suffering he endured. I guess he must have been insane after all, even insane before he became insane. The people who used to live here, before writing came to this part of the world, before we were Christianized, I guess before agriculture came at all, I think they were pretty happy and content overall. Sure, they might live much shorter lives than us, and die much more often, but who wants to be 80 anyways? Imagine how the world must have appeared to them. You didn't know what existed beyond a certain range you used to walk in, had no idea. There was magic then, and your tribe was the true people, the ones who mattered. Life was mysterious, gruesome, beautiful, and every generation was not cursed with the knowledge of history. Stephen Dedalus said this line that has stuck with me ever since I first read it. He said, history is a nightmare from which I'm trying to awake. What is this attempt at awakening from history but an urge for ignorance? A wish to be able to live ahistorically. Today the world is old, and we know that nothing new happens under the sun. Perhaps not under our sun, but don't forget, there are other suns out there, Sven said. Well, let's stick to our own earth for now. If we get to other suns, it seems to me we will only multiply our problems. Fine, so you want to kill yourself because of history, he said, trying to be witty. No, and please don't make jokes out of this, I sighed. You know I can't stand talking to people who only listen so they can find an appropriate place to put in a joke. People like that have watched talk shows too much, where the host has to crack a joke every half minute or he gets fired. They're like people who have watched too much reality TV. The toxicity starts to affect that person. It seeps into their very being and soul. Anyway, fuck that. People who criticize reality TV are usually just as bad and insufferable. Okay then, let's go back to the part where you explain why you want to kill yourself. I didn't know how I could explain my decision to go to the preacher's pulpit. Sven had so far in his life stayed in the mainstream currents of thought. The guidance and life he had provided to his little brother had so far consisted in telling me to get smarter glasses and start working out. I had done the first, but whenever he mentioned the second thing, I told him to read a book that wasn't written in the last 100 years. Our conversation quickly stopped there. Most philosophers take for granted that knowledge is a good thing, and the more we have of it, the better. For those few who question whether or not it is actually better to remain ignorant, it's already too late. There's no turning back. Maybe the best way to live in the 21st century is superficially, but misery wants company, and if you cannot talk to your brother, who can you talk to? Okay, let's play a guessing game, I said, turning away from the window and looking at Sven. What is the worst mistake in the history of the human race? A mistake that may have cursed our existence ever since we made it. I don't know, Sven said. There are so many, I guess. Hitler? Nope, just think about it for a while. I think I got it. Slavery? Nope. Guns, the atomic bomb, television? I shook my head at all these proposals. After Sven had given numerous more guesses, some of them made in jest and not fit to repeat here, he finally gave up. So tell me, what is worse than Hitler, slavery and the atomic bomb? Agriculture. Agriculture? Agriculture. What's so bad about agriculture? I don't get it. I'm pretty sure it fed you this morning. I read an article by a guy who basically said that agriculture was the root of most of our evils today, such as social and sexual inequality, disease and so on. I think I'll blame agriculture for beginning the process of alienating us from the land. Look outside the window. There used to be trees everywhere here, at least when the land was not submerged in the ocean or covered in ice. When you look at modern hunter-gatherers, they don't want to be farmers. So much more trouble. But it doesn't really matter that much. I used to be convinced by the vision of progress. Humanity is getting better and better. Technology will continue to improve our lives, and so on. Well, you should be glad you didn't die from the infection you got last year. Thanks to civilization, you got your antibiotics. I guess that's true, but that might not be true for long. Anyway, in the grand scheme of things, it's immaterial. How is that immaterial? Because you're about to kill yourself, so you might as well have died last year? No, that's not what I mean. Look, just listen. Let's start from another place. I think one thing that really affected me is that maybe I've become disillusioned by Western culture, by civilization itself, by the whole trajectory we are on, and the myths we use to justify it. Do you mean because we might be heading for disaster because of global warming? Well, that is one of the most immediate and obvious symptoms that something is wrong with our culture. We know people are trying to solve it, but they're basically asking, how can we stop global warming and still keep pumping up oil and gas from the ground? It's like a doctor trying to dress a patient's wound while the patient keeps getting stabbed by the would-be murderer. The leaders trying to solve global warming under capitalism is performing in the largest comedy on earth. And who do we look up to? People like that. You know, it's often lamented that Rome fell, but I bet thousands upon thousands had cursed Rome before it fell, wishing for that day of destruction. And we are the product of civilization. All those people who did not embrace it, who kept living without destroying the forest and working in the sweat of their brows over the land, what happened to them? Well, guess what happens when a society capable of sustaining, say, 50 impoverished peasants for every hunter-gatherer goes to war with such a hunter-gatherer society? Might makes right. And now our advanced societies are killing life everywhere at an unprecedented rate. It's kind of like discovering you live under the Nazis. Okay, that might be a bit exaggerated, but anyway, if it keeps going like this, soon the whole earth will turn desolate, devoid of most if not all life. It will be the greatest Holocaust ever. Sometimes I think maybe that isn't so bad after all. I don't know. So what's your solution? You want to end civilization and go back to the Stone Age? Maybe that isn't such a bad idea, though I guess there's no turning back now. You are a crazy man. Seems to me we all are. While we were talking, a middle-aged lady of a rather stout character had been sleeping in a seat on the opposite side of the compartment we were sitting in, not too far from us. During our talk I noticed that she had awoken from her slumber and had cast occasional rather menacing glances at us. Now she was standing next to us, complaining that our loud conversation had brought her out of her dream state. "Young men," she told us in a high-pitched voice, "I want to inform you that I have a terrible headache, and had a little while ago taken a sleeping pill. Your loud and wild talk managed to pull me out of this blissful state, so would you by God mind respecting an old lady, and either not talk here or move somewhere else?" This speech faithfully preserved here was interspersed with several pauses wherein she grabbed her head and lamented her constitution. I was about to offer an apology, but Sven cut me short and said, "This is not a silent compartment. We are allowed to talk here. You can move somewhere else if you find our company a nuisance to you. This is a matter of life and death, and we have just as much right to be here as you." And saying this, he turned away from her. I merely looked at her and shrugged. She started to walk back, but instead of her original seat, she chose another one which was farther away from us. "I do have to say," Sven resumed, "it seems to me a rather selfish thing to do. I'm sure you haven't said anything to the old ones of your plans. They would be devastated if you make the jump. They are your parents after all. They have both been generally kind and decent towards us, and I don't want you to do it either." "It's just as selfish of them to create life as it is for me to destroy it," I replied. "I heard that the Chinese worship their ancestors, and think that they owe them an unpayable debt for giving birth to them. Well, if you believe that life is good and worth living, sure, then go on worshipping them. If on the other hand life is actually a terrible burden, what could be more selfish than to thrust someone into this sphere of existing without asking them? And then, when they start to become mature enough to realize this burden, you tell them that they are not allowed by any means to cast off the shackles of life. I say that suicide is a human right, and that a person is free to choose whether or not he wants to breathe. Do not spin me into a web of human relations that I am not allowed to cut by my own free will. I simply won't accept that." I had worked myself into a somewhat excited state, and had inadvertently raised my voice and become quite emotional during this speech. This caused the old lady, who had fallen asleep again, to awaken anew, and she now cried that for her sake I might as well kill myself, as long as I would just remain quiet. I won't describe my brother's response to this reply from the recently slumbering lady, but he got up from his seat and exchanged some rather grave words with her. When he came back, he looked at me with a serious and frowning countenance, still breathing heavily from his heated exchange with the so-called lady. What seemed like an hour or so went by in brooding silence, with us both being occupied in various melancholy thoughts, though my brother's thoughts were presumably concerned about me. "Do you remember a few years ago when you went through therapy a year after you started your studies in Aarhus?" Sven said. "You told me you had personal problems." Here he leaned close and almost whispered. "Both with imaginary guilt of not being a good person and with anxieties about not being able to be completely in control of your bladder, especially during class. And that was even though you had never had an accident, and the last time you pissed your bed was when you were 8 years old." "So what? What have this to do with anything? And you were the one who pissed your pants that Christmas when you were like 12 or so, when I kept tickling you even though you told me to stop." My response had been much louder than my brother's discreet whisper, and he got a little flushed and looked around the train compartment. The old lady seemed not to have heard. "Well, fuck you for bringing that up. I'm trying to help you. I think your problem is that you are too much detached from life. You're like a monk who has denied himself all the ordinary experiences of life, rejected the outside world, and confined himself to a little cell. And there you sit, flagellating yourself with your game, trying to convince yourself you can master your own body and play through the pain, though I doubt your browser history would show you as an ascetic who denied the pleasures of the flesh. You should go out more in the world, participate in things. I can't believe you haven't even voted in an election yet. You know, you should be glad you live in a free country where democracy rules. Plenty of people have had it much worse throughout history. You live in a society where you're free to do what you want, and you can even shape that society by just spending a few minutes casting a vote. I simply don't get why you don't bother to vote. I told you why I don't vote so many times already. Yes, and I keep telling you that your vote matters even though there are a million other votes," Sven said. "I know my vote matters, and I have actually really wanted to vote ever since I turned 18, I said facetiously. But the thing is, I'm simply too afraid that I will destroy our great democracy." "What are you talking about?" "Well, I think overall things are pretty good, and that the people who have participated in our democracy so far are doing a decent job. We haven't all died yet, and we seem to get along decently. Now, since my vote is of such a great importance, I'm afraid that I will mess up our political system by casting my vote. Every time I go to the ballot box, having made up my mind to support such and such a person and party, I feel a gripping fear seize my whole body. The responsibility of my very important and crucial vote is simply too crushing to bear. How do I know that I won't unwittingly cause the destruction of our society by casting my very important individual vote? And so, since my vote matters so much, and our democracy doesn't seem to be doomed for the apocalypse without me, I refrain from exercising my duty as a citizen, lest my very important vote should destroy everything we hold dear. Sven opened his mouth as if to refute me, then hesitated and shut it again. After having thought for a while, he merely shook his head. I think you are just too lazy to vote. I guess for you voting means you get to play one less game of Dota that day. And all this joking is just a defense mechanism you use when I start to talk about your personal life. The old lady had left the compartment along with others who had gotten off, and we were almost alone now. Anyway, my point is, Sven continued, that you are fixed upon this idea of suicide. To justify it, you reason in this detached, philosophical way, talking about God, or rather, the lack of God, civilization, global warming, and so on. You bring up Nietzsche, nihilism, and the past where you talk about more idyllic societies, which were closer to nature. And sure, this may be the causes that motivate you to commit this philosophical suicide, and you may be completely justified in doing so. But I think you are ignoring your own past, your own personal story, your own body. Your own life is a fucking mess and you know it. To begin with, just look at your goddamn right arm, for Christ's sake. Your fingers have been moving back and forth constantly, like a pendulum, since we sat down in this train. And now, why is that? You know that I'm in pain, I said sadly. Yes, and I also know the reason why. Your right arm is fucked because you have spent the majority of your time on this earth sitting in front of the screen, playing your games. And when you started getting physical problems from sitting 12 hours in front of a screen every day, you just ignored them and they got worse. And now you're like an alcoholic who gets the shakes if he doesn't have the bottle. And you play merely to be fully occupied with something, so you temporarily forget your pain, which only returns with a vengeance. This was not false, though not completely true. I had spent a large portion of my existence in front of the screen, but I had endured months, even years, where I had stayed off my main vice. And I had gotten skilled at the game, competed, created videos and guides that thousands of people have enjoyed. Bankfish, who was in China at a tournament, told me that he met a lot of people online who were using my name. But others had made a career out of it, made it their livelihood, became millionaires, while I had been forced to stop in my prime, merely to return as a washed-out addict several years later, who could not compete with the best, but who instead tried to get relevant again by making YouTube videos. And I suppose the main reason I created stuff was to try to justify the fact that I was using a large portion of my life on the game again, to the detriment of my health, other interests, and personal relations. I used to tell my ex-girlfriend that she was the only one who could pull me away from the game, but she didn't believe that. I'm not sure who was right. Dota or death, I suppose. Can't live with it, can't live without it. Having made my struggles with the game public knowledge by announcing my retirement, and only lasting a couple of days before playing the game again, someone posted a short story about the event on Reddit. Welcome to another episode of the life and struggles of Slasher, a show subtitled Extraordinary Build Inventor, Dyslexic, and 6K MMR Pop Stomper. This show, a saga spanning years in the making, follows Lazarus, a young genius Dota player caught betwixt a downward spiral of video game addiction and his need to evaluate his habit in social media. Today's episode, titled Relapse, aired November 5th, 2015. The main storyline of the plot takes place in Aalborg, Denmark. In it, we follow Lazarus as he walks the long dark streets, now veiled in Danish winter. He eventually returns to Dota after a 3-day stint full of self-doubt and second-guessing. The opening line of the opening scene spoken out loud by Lazarus over an establishing shot of a dark alleyway reads as follows. God damn it, what am I to do when I can't play Dota anymore? Reveals a mind torn by having to make tough decisions. Lazarus faces the realities of the long and cold Danish winter and crawls back into Dota's waiting grasp after quitting for what feels like the 1000th time. God damn it. I suppose that is not too bad of a rendering of my predicament, though he did think for some reason I lived in Aalborg. Well, actually apart from the location, it is pretty spot on. I changed the name, since this is merely a fictional account, and our protagonist's name, that is me, is named Lazarus, though you may call me Ishmael. Again, I must stress that this is a fictional account. Any similarities that you may or may not think that Lazarus has to the author is merely a coincidence. And if any future potential employer is considering hiring me, I can only say that, and this is a comment directly from the author, that my greatest weakness is that I work too hard. The author can assure you, sir or madam, that I have barely even tried these so-called computer games, and would certainly never allow myself to dedicate any of my precious time on such solitary pursuits. No, I spent my majority of free time being a good citizen by going to the fitness gym, rescuing lost baby seals and whales stranded on the shores of Aarhus, and above all I spent my time voting in Danish elections, the latter taking up the majority of my leisure hours. And do you remember what happened when you went to therapy? You told me about this, Sven said. Yeah, I guess I'm starting to see your point, I replied. Well, just to make it clear to you and refresh your memory, you spent the whole hour trying to abstract away from your person, from your body, from your problems. You spent, what was it, almost $200 of our parents' money just talking about the universe, and how life is pointless, and how humans used to be fishes and so on, and the eventual dying out of the sun, etc., etc. You just abstracted away from your problems, didn't dare to actually open up and discuss them, and used your metaphysical abstractions and theorizing as a shield against anything that might come too close to your real problems, anything that would make you vulnerable as a person. Let us not spend this whole trip to the preacher's pulpit in abstractions. Consider putting down the shield, at least for a while. Oh brother, what art thou? I whispered. Fine, along with my philosophical reflections, I will not neglect my personal history. So we will have two different approaches towards an explanation for this gloomy undertaking, and we shall see which will prevail, or if we will arrive at a synthesis at the end, or rather before the end, I guess. So maybe we should talk about the fact that your ex-girlfriend left you not too long ago as a possible contributing factor that has led to our current predicament, Sven said. I suppose we could do that at some point, but let us not talk about that right now. The sun is setting, casting long shadows over the land, and yonder sits a woman who gazes out of the window with the same wonder and appreciation of the spectacle as I have at the moment. Let's be silent and observe. And thus we joined the cast of characters silently traveling through the landscape on a path traveled countless times before, laid out safely before us. Yet all were bound for destruction, though mine was likely the most imminent. Chapter 3. We arrived in the town of Hirtshals, which lies on the northwest coast of Jutland, at 7 in the evening. The ferry we had to take left at 8, but we decided that it would be best to just stay the night, instead of embarking straight for a 9-hour sailing trip. We found a rather nice hostel, though not a cheap one. When I'm traveling, the most important thing is to have a decent place to sleep. It just needs to be a place where silence is ensured, and to be a non-smoking room. After having made the arrangement for our lodging, we decided to go down to the beach and watch the sunset. The waves were licking the sand, the seagulls were screaming, etc., etc. I'm sure you have been at a beach and have seen the sunset, so there's no further need for me to describe the scene. One beach is much like another. And who really cares about places anyway? It's the persons that matter. What they say, who they are, what they do, or what they don't say and don't do, or how they try to kill themselves. I think it was about 300 million years ago that some idiot decided to crawl up on these shores and muse to my brother. This shore? All shores are alike. Doesn't matter which shore. Anyway, big mistake. We were far better off in the water. And what happens now if I decide to return to my ancestral origins? I can't. I will quickly freeze to death if I don't drown before that. Thanks a lot for that, evolution. But, I suppose it might be a decent way to go, though the wise old man in the Prestige does rather muddle the issue by first saying that it's a heavenly way to die and then saying it's the worst. Sven looked at me with concern. But no, don't worry brother, there's still time. To the preacher's pulpit we go, and there our faith and fate will be decided, or at least mine. We were sitting on a dune about 50 meters from the sea's edge. Some locals and some tourists were walking along the edge of the sea, while others just stood gazing out at it. Sven tried to get me to talk about my ex and the breakup, but I just shrugged my shoulders and kept gazing out at the sea. When he insisted on talking about her, I interrupted him and said, "You know, the whales and dolphins are really much smarter than us. The philosophical implications of their existence are profound, though I permit they may be erroneous. Those creatures went up on land just like us, or perhaps they were us at that time, I don't know. But they found out that land actually sucks and returned to the sea. Imagine those creatures walking around on the land being miserable. One day a genius arose among them, a prophet who would lead them out of their bondage to the land and into an abundance of water, "Follow me," he said, "and I will undo our greatest mistake. What we need is salt and water." And he held up a handful of dust, and they were surely afraid of the dust. "See how small you are now. See how you are the prey of beasts who eat your flesh for their pleasure. But if we are to go back into the sea, there will be no limits to our growth." Oh shit, I'm being really sexist now. Let's call her a she. Well, she had an understanding of gravity which would not be rivaled until Newton, and she realized that in water there would be plenty of Lebensraum, living space, you know. "We can become so large that surely no creature can ever harm us," the ancient prophet said. "We will become behemoths, we will become whales. Right now we are pitiable creatures moving in 2 dimensions. Why not make a tree, oh brothers and sisters?" If you think Jesus or Zarathustra had a profound effect on history, now you must admit they are nothing compared to this preacher of whales. "I don't think that's quite how evolution works, Lazarus," my brother said. I ignored his appeal to realism and continued. "But while these proto-whales were on land, they must have eaten an apple or 2 of the tree of knowledge, since they could never fully be at home in the sea again. They must constantly return to the shallow air and breathe. I suppose we can call that God's punishment for their transgression. And we humans have also been doing our part in making them regret leaving our land-bound club. We really came at them with a fury that would make the harassment of ex-members of Scientology by the church look like silly pranks. How dare you defame our land-bound existence? You think you are better off in the sea? Fear the air and your breath, Leviathan. I'm coming for you and your kindred." That's humanity for a couple of 100 years. Not so much anymore. Maybe we got more enlightened, or maybe we just found a better way to lighten our way in the dark. No need for nice whale oil anymore. The whales should truly be grateful to Edison, or whoever he stole the idea of electric light from. The downside to all this from a personal point of view is that I cannot escape the damp and drizzly November by going on a long whaling trip. Thus I have no substitute for pistol and ball. Anyway, talking about transgressions, I don't care much for the theological implications of Adam and Eve's transgression in the garden, but we can look at the story from a secular perspective, though we may have to squeeze it a bit to fit. But it's not like we are the first to edit some story in the Bible who ruffle Mao. Sven turned his head and looked at me rather puzzled. "What?" he said. "Sorry, too much time spent on the internet. Anyway, there are basically 2 conclusions we can draw from it. First, we would probably be better off without this whole consciousness thing that evolution gave us. Just look at dogs. They seem much happier than us. We're like an experiment, and it may turn out that life generally is much better when you aren't as clever as us Homo sapiens sapiens. Look, we even have 2 sapiens in there. That is quite impressive, though we did bestow that title upon ourselves. So anyway, that's what happens when we are banished. We get consciousness, and from then on we are doomed to have a pretty bad time. And the second conclusion?" "What is the second conclusion?" Sven asked. Shit, I forgot. It's probably not that important, and it's very likely rather depressing. Just forget about the second conclusion. Too much Bible stuff ruins this fresh air anyway, so let's close the book for now, so to say. After a while of quiet contemplation of the serene scenery, we were treated to a different kind of beauty. A rather pretty young buxom girl walked across the beach. Sven looked at her with a wolfish smile and brought out his phone. A new town, new opportunities. I better get on Tinder, and so should you. I threw away my phone. You what? I gave you that phone, man. Well, I guess all the pretty girls in this town are mine then. I watched him swipe most of the girls to the right. I was surprised when he rejected a rather nice looking girl. Why did you swipe her to the left? She's fat. What? She didn't look fat at all. Trust me, I can tell. She is fat. Dude, you are horrible. If she was fat, it wasn't that bad. And so what if she was a little bit overweight? Sven shrugged. It's Tinder, man. If I don't like fat girls, I won't talk to fat girls. And that is entirely my decision. Well, I guess that's your prerogative. Did you get any matches yet? Patience, young one. I kinda hoped he wouldn't hook up with anyone, since then I would probably regret that I threw away my phone. After he was done browsing what the town of Hirtshals could offer, which was not bad, he said, Since you won't talk about your ex, can you at least talk about your daughter troubles? Why don't you just quit, man? It's not like it is opium that you are addicted to, or something like that. If I ever perceived that something had a negative impact on my life, I would just cut it out. You know, self-control, man. I know you exercise it when you drink, since you have hardly drunk more than a couple of beers at a time since you graduated high school. So why don't you just quit Dota? You haven't played this whole day, and you don't seem like you're dying. He looked at me, genuinely curious of knowing more of my problem, which was truly difficult for him to understand. I did my best to explain my relationship to the game to him. Whenever I mentioned to friends my problem with gaming and my solutions, they would invariably laugh. Sometimes I rather wish that I had problems with something else, like alcohol or eating too much. At least people wouldn't laugh when I told them about it. Those are the kind of socially sanctioned, acceptable addictions, which don't surprise people and hopefully don't make them laugh. It is probably better to be addicted to gaming than being an alcoholic, or maybe not, since an alcoholic can at least be a lot more social than an introverted gamer who stays in his room all day. I should definitely write an essay at some point exploring the question of the benefits and drawbacks of being a compulsive gamer versus a destructive alcoholic. I have quit Dota, I explained. I have quit it many times. The problem is that I start playing again after a while. The first time I quit Dota was in high school, and I basically stopped playing the game for 2 years. But then when I moved to Aarhus, I just wanted to try it again. It had been so long since last I played. And what would be the problem, since I was able to quit the first time and clearly showed I was in control, since I could quit for 2 years. But I didn't know that the first time you quit is the easiest. The second time you try to quit, you realize that you have tried to quit before, and you realize that you failed. So you start doubting your capacity to quit. And if you're going to return to the game anyway whenever you quit, why bother quitting at all? It was getting darker, and the sun had almost disappeared over the horizon. Most people had left the beach. Go on, tell me more, Sven said. The first time I quit, I merely uninstalled the game, and that was it. But then if you want to quit again, you need to do something more than just delete the game. You need to make this time you quit special. It came to a point where I would throw my flat screen out in the trash and cut the cord of my mouse just so I wouldn't be able to play. I even went so far one time as to destroy my good internet connection by messing up the switch you put your cable in. Instead, I had to rely on a shared network, which allows access to the internet but is too unstable to actually play Dota on. What happened in all those cases was that I just ended up buying a new mouse, buying a new screen and so on. For my internet I even got a guy out to fix it, but I couldn't tell him the truth that I broke it on purpose, so I had to lie to him and tell him that it was broken and that I tried to fix it. He didn't believe me and questioned me several times, but he couldn't put together a coherent alternative explanation, so I didn't get in trouble and got the repair for free. I guess my actions were so weird that he simply could not imagine someone purposely destroying their internet connection for any reason. But maybe I shouldn't give up. Maybe it's possible for me to quit and stay away from the game. I have gone months without playing, even after having quit a lot, so I guess I could do it, but it's not easy. I start getting better, I start having a lot less pain, and I start thinking, well, sure you can play a bit, you're fine now, a few games doesn't hurt. But then I go from not playing at all to pretty much doing nothing else for a week or so. It's all or nothing. Just like being an alcoholic, you don't go to a bar and get just a couple of drinks. You have to stay completely away. It was slowly getting darker, and we both sat there in silence, close to each other. We were the only ones left on the beach, or at least we couldn't see anyone else. I talked a little longer on how I had started studying philosophy, just so I could actually do something which would stay with me for the rest of my life. Not like Dota, where if you quit, that's pretty much it. I explained to him that all the hours sunk into it just seemed mainly to be lost. What you enjoy doing is not time wasted, he said. Maybe, but if those hours leave you physically exhausted and in pain, they probably aren't well spent. What I still don't get is how you have played the same game for over 10 years. Doesn't it get boring at some point to play again and again? Well, it is an extremely complex game. Imagine chess with the board 100 times as big, and each time you play you have to choose one piece among 100 unique pieces, each piece having several unique movesets. Oh, and there's 10 people playing, all moving at the same time. Chess is like a child's game when compared to Dota in terms of complexity. Don't tell a chess fan I said that, however, but it's true. We see computers beating masters at chess, and now also Go, which supposedly is more complex than chess. But it would take a much better AI to beat a Dota master. Every game in Dota is unique, and what makes it more interesting is that you get matched with 9 other people all over Europe. For about an hour your life is interwoven with 9 strangers. There's only 2 outcomes. Either you win and get plus 25 points, or you lose and get minus 25 points. I'm sure I would play a lot more soccer if I could just press a button and find 9 other people to play with within minutes. But if it is so wonderful, how come you complain about the game all the time? And you say you often get punished and sent to daughter hell. Well, feelings can get quite heated up during the game. It's kind of like being married in the old way, where there was basically no way to get out of the marriage unless the other person died. And death won't even help you in Dota, not yours or your teammates. You will just resurrect. You are stuck with your 4 teammates no matter how retarded they are. When you find a game, all that matters is whether you leave it with plus 25 or minus 25. Everything that happens in between is for the calm, collected player just noise. You just got to be full tryhard to get into the top 200 leaderboards. But once you get into the game, your feelings sometimes take over. You succumb to the dark side and you lose sight of your plus 25 points. I sometimes break down completely and go from full tryhard to full retard. I had a game after a week or so where I had not played. My performance was rather lackluster, and after 10 minutes or so one ally flamed me, telling me I was a clueless idiot. I muted him and soldiered on like a good full tryharder. A bit later, another ally told me that he hoped that my family die of cancer in real life. He got muted as well instantly, full tryhard style, and I still kept on playing the best I could. But when a third teammate a little while later screamed, "You fucking animal!" and told me to uninstall the game, I simply got fed up. The other 2 had probably been shouting curses at me all the while. Now it was the majority that flamed me, and I went from full tryhard to full retard. I tossed all my weapons and armor to the ground and destroyed them in front of my allies. They reported me and I went to Dota hell. 5 games you have to play with the worst of the worst scum of Dota players. If Dota had existed at Dante's time, he would have made Dota hell one of his 9 circles in the Inferno. This destructive behavior is not an uncommon occurrence in Dota. A lot of people tilt like that, sometimes because they get abused, sometimes because an ally dies when they think he shouldn't, and sometimes just because they can't handle the pressure. I once broke my headset because I tossed it against the wall in anger. I was actually recording the game while it happened, and now over 70,000 people have watched the sound of a Homo sapiens breaking his headphones because he got ganked. So at least some people found amusement in my destructive and infantile behavior. That's the definition of being tilted, throwing your headset like that. Go ahead, put it into YouTube on your phone. It's not hard to find. Lend me your phone and I'll find it. Are you Fuck. Fuck. Oh, that's it, boys. That's it as well. Alright. I forgot you had such anger in you, Sven said after I played the short video for him. He found it rather amusing even though he had seen it before. Tilting in Dota is actually an interesting ground for psychological research, I said. A huge part of the game is just mental and trying to keep a positive attitude. The best players have realized that the worst thing you can do is to talk negatively to your team, complaining or shouting at them. Some just mute everybody at the start and try to focus on the game, but sometimes it can be problematic if you can't talk to your teammates. It's a rare breed that don't flame, the few saints among all we many other players who are human, also human. I've had some good sprees where I was a pure gentleman, going full try hard. I set a goal to reach 7000 MMR, that's short for matchmaking rating. I was at 6950 points at one point, only 2 wins away. It was within my reach, yet I simply couldn't get those 2 wins. And now I'm at about 6500 points. I have given up reaching that goal now, but at least I can say I was once in the top 25 in Europe. By the way, if you ever think about trying Dota, don't do it. It is like smoking, you try it once and suddenly you are addicted. Smoking all day. Don't worry, it seems way too stressful for me. I'll keep away, Sven said. We continued talking for a while. Sven began to be less focused though, and had started writing to someone on Tinder while we had pauses in our discussion, or rather my monologue, I guess. He started stirring and announced that he was going to have a drink with the girl he was talking to. Do you want to come along? He asked. And be the third wheel? Nah, I think it's best you two just go at it alone. Thanks, he grinned. If I don't write, can you give me an hour or so alone in our room? You can hang out in the lobby or go sightseeing or something. I complained that it was getting too dark for sightseeing, but ended up ascending to his request. I decided to stay here for a while and contemplate the impenetrable ocean. The sound of the waves gently crashing on the shore was like a lamentable calling, an invitation to come, to submerge one's consciousness in nothingness. Desolate and empty is the sea, inviting me to its embrace. Why go all the way to the pulpit when one can preach right here? Death should come within minutes, and surely it couldn't go wrong. Either it works and I drown, or it doesn't work and I'm fine. Maybe just a little wet and cold. Fear death by water. But why? It doesn't seem like that bad of a death. I started to rise and walk slowly towards the water's edge. There's nothing to do, no one to be, nowhere to go. All is vanity. Tears started trickling down my chin. Lazarus, what do you want? And I answered, I want to die. The wisdom of Silenus. Lined up in 2 rows on either side of me towards the water stood all the people that I had known in my life. Most were just silently looking at me, some disinterested, some puzzled, some sympathetic. A few were crying. There were even some who looked triumphant, even joyful. I did not wish to speak with any of them, least of all those who had been closest to me. I heard someone whisper, "Consider Phlebas, who was once as handsome and tall as you." I could not see my ex among the assembled. My legs managed to carry me halfway towards the water before they started to shake. I sunk down on my knees with my head buried in my hands and wept. I have lived here long enough. It doesn't matter if I die at 25 or 75. Why not wait and see what happens to the world? What's the next war going to be like? Are you going to miss the ending of Game of Thrones? Why suffer when you don't have to? Why not drop the burden and let the stone roll over you? There are no gods, no afterlife, no divine rewards, no divine punishment. All is human, too human. All nymphs have departed. The earth is dying anyway, so why not get it over with? I should hurry up, it's time. I managed to finally crawl to the edge of the water. Everyone had disappeared, and there were only silence and the waves. There is no reason to kill myself, and no reason not to kill myself. Where is the music that will creep by upon the waters? There was no music. Fuck it, I said, stood up and looked around me on the shore. I was the only living being here. Soon there would be no life. I could see far inland the lights of civilization, the beacon of so-called progress. But warm beds and delicious food could undeniably be found there. All is vanity, said the preacher. I turned back to the water and took a deep breath. The next moment I was running as fast as I could out into the water, and when I couldn't run anymore I plunged into it, trying to dive as deep as possible. Chapter 4. A few minutes later I was standing on the beach, shivering and even more miserable than before. Are you relieved that I'm still alive? Or do you find it disappointing that I, the protagonist, didn't die? Perhaps you are indifferent, or you simply postponed judgment on the matter. I'm sure you would get a lot more information about Sven if I had drowned. The narrative would switch to him right now, and he is at this moment having sex with his date. They are both beautiful Homo sapiens sapiens, and it's likely you would be aroused if I was describing that scene right now. What a shame I'm still alive, for both of us. Anyway, the water was extremely cold, and after being immersed in it for almost a minute, I got this strange, inexplicable desire to breathe. I tried to suppress it, but the desire to breathe just kept on being stronger and stronger. I'm sure you can relate. The mind may give up the ghost, but the body is much tougher, I guess. But let's just say that I wanted to go on a late night swim, and that is all that happened. That's what we are going to tell Sven. It wasn't really a suicide attempt, I think. So we can't say that I also failed at killing myself. That's the benefit of the preacher's pulpit. You just need a moment of courage and then you can't back out like a coward. Death by water requires you to be much more consistent and requires an insane amount of willpower. But maybe if instead of trying to dive down straight away, I just swam out as far as I could and then... Nah, enough water for today. I was freezing and my clothes were completely soaked. Back to barracks? I stammered and hurried as fast as I could to the warm embrace of late capitalist post-industrial society. Chapter 5. I entered the lobby, wet and chilled to the bone. I could not wait to take a hot bath and hear how Sven's Tinder date had went. I feared that he might be using our room as I walked up to the stairs towards it, but fortunately the room turned out empty. Perhaps he was still drinking in the lobby with his intended. I felt the warm water envelop my body and managed to regain a normal human body temperature. My newly regained composure was not to last, however. When I turned on the lights in the bedroom, I received an immediate shock and was momentarily stunned. I just stood there gaping on Sven's empty bed. There was blood on his bedsheet. It was unmistakably blood, and the sheet was soaked in it. On the right side of the bed lay an used condom. It was one of my condoms which the rogue had stolen. This made no sense. Surely Sven was no murderer, and I doubt any girl could overpower and hurt him. And why would either of the party hurt the other? Such things do not happen in Denmark, or at least very rarely. I knew Sven, and he surely could have done her no harm, whatever she might have done or said. I sat down on my own bed and just looked in wonder at the scene. Perhaps there was a dark side I didn't know of my brother. Perhaps he just accidentally hurt her. And if she was dead, where was her body? And even more important, where was Sven at this moment? I decided that whatever he had done, for whatever reason, he was still my brother, and I should help him in any way I could. I was about to take the dirty sheet and hide it when I heard someone trying to open the door to our room. I rushed over to the door and just managed to block it in time, so it was only opened a little. I heard a loud female groan on the other side. "Who is it?" I said timidly. "Don't come in right now, I am busy right now." "Room service. Me clean room." "There's no need for that, the room is fine." "No, me clean room. Room service. Me sent to clean room." "Then you hear me. Go away. Don't clean room, I am masturbating." "No, boss sent me. Me clean room. Clean room me will." And saying so, she pushed hard against the door and forced it open. I simply panicked and hurried out of the room as fast as possible. It suddenly dawned on me that I could become implicated in this whole mess, and that they might think that it was me that had done something wrong. And why on earth would there be room service at such a late hour? Perhaps they had heard something and got suspicious, or they saw the terrible look which might have showed on my brother's face as he presumably left the hotel. This was a mess I had no idea how to handle, and I decided to get out of this place as quickly as possible. Imagine my astonishment when on my way out of the hotel, I discovered my brother sitting in the bar. He was calmly lounging in a nice sofa at a little table, sipping a beer and eating a sandwich. When he saw me, he beckoned towards me with a grin. "You look like you saw a ghost," he said when I was standing next to him. "Are you crazy? What are you still doing here? They know what happened in our room. How can you be smiling at such a moment? We have to get out of here, right now." "What are you talking about? Relax and have a beer, and I'll tell you about my date. I can order a sandwich for you as well." "I know about your date, and know what happened to her. I saw your bed sheet. And room service just came up. She will surely tell management soon. We have to go now, or you will end up in prison." "Oh, you saw that? Yeah, I really didn't expect such a mess. That was quite the bloodbath. I hope they had cleaned it up before you came back. Sorry for that." "What, you sent them to clean it up? Why would you do that?" "Oh, don't worry. I told them I had spilled tomato juice on the bed. And even if they don't believe me, what does it matter? They will clean it anyway." "What does it matter? They will send you to prison for years for what you have done." "Prison?" Sven looked puzzled. "Why would they send me to prison? She told me she was 19. And you know the age of consent is 15. I'm sure she was at least 15. Pretty sure she was 19. "But your bed is soaked with blood," I said way too loudly, so that I drew the attention from several nearby patrons. "Dude, calm yourself. So what if there's blood on my bed? You can't be a warrior without a little blood on your sword, you know. And I'm not going to pass an opportunity like that, just because the bed might get a little messy," he winked. "How can you just sit here calmly talking about a girl you just killed? Are you my brother?" "Killed? I didn't kill anyone. We just had sex." "Oh, now I get it." And here Sven got a fit of laughter that lasted for a very long time. When he was finally done laughing, he wiped the tears from his eyes. "How can you be so clever and yet so stupid? It was her period, Shark Week, you know. Girls get that. She told me, but I told her I didn't really mind. Didn't expect it to be such a carnage though. But hey, we're at a hotel. I don't have to clean it myself." I was completely flabbergasted and just sank down in the chair opposite him. For a long time I just sat with my face in my palms, while Sven considered the whole situation extremely amusing. "I need a beer," I finally said. "I'll buy you one, bro. You deserve it for what you have been through." I pondered the situation for a while over my beer. I started to laugh at myself, though I was still embarrassed over my readiness in thinking my brother a murderer. "But don't you think," I asked him, "that they're at least going to ask questions when they see your bed covered in blood?" "Probably not, and if they ask, so what? I'll just tell them the truth. And I can always get the girl to confirm it." He opened his Tinder app. "What? I can't find her. Man, she removed me. What a slut. I can't believe she just fucked and ditched me. Oh well, that is Tinder. I can assure you this does not reflect in any way on my sexual prowess in bed. I bet she's just ashamed of the amount of blood or something. I can assure you I made her orgasm, maybe twice. Or did she fake it? Damn it, I'm starting to question my own performance. Anyway, let's forget about the whole thing for now." "Alright, fine, but I hope they don't ask questions." "It's fine, man. I told them it's tomato juice. You don't know how many people spill tomato juice all over their hotel beds." He tried to play it off as a joke, but I had made him a bit worried over whether or not the hotel would call the police to investigate the matter. "What have you been doing meanwhile? And thanks for giving me plenty of time with my date." I reflected whether or not I should tell him the truth about my temporary insanity on the beach, but I decided against it. I stayed a bit on the beach and just walked around the city, nothing much. After half an hour more of winding down in the bar, we decided that our room must be clean now. Fortunately, no police officers had arrived at the hotel. Before sleeping, I went into the bathroom with my iPhone and jerked off to some porn as quietly as I could, hoping Sven would not notice my wickedness. It wouldn't have been fair if he was the only one who busted a nut that day. I deserved some stress relief as well after my ordeal. Don't judge me, I know you masturbate as well. Maybe you even consciously or unconsciously touched yourself a little while reading this chapter. Probably not though, and if you did, I wouldn't judge you. With the death of God, everything is permitted, right? Chapter 6. We woke up early the next morning at around 10 and checked out of the hotel. Since we had to wait until evening for the ferry to leave, I suggested that we take an extended walk and explore the environment around Hirtshals. Surprisingly, however, Sven was reluctant to embark on such a journey. After a bit of probing, I found out he was trying to arrange another Tinder date this afternoon with a new girl. "Oh, come on, let your penis rest a while and come adventuring with me. Together we shall explore the unknown lands of Hirtshals. Bro before Tinder date, Sven, my only brother." He grumbled a bit, but finally put his phone in his pocket. "Fine, we will explore together. But in return I want to hear you talk about your ex. No more putting it off now. She seems to be part of your suicidal puzzle. Quid pro quo, I see. I'll give you something, you give me something. That is fair enough." And so we set out on our little hike, traveling away from the corrupt and corrupting city where the dead men dwell, and into the supposedly blessed nature. The weather was mild, the sky was almost completely clouded, and there was a mild drizzle. Perfect weather for a melancholic type like me. I had been hopelessly in love with my neighbor, I began after we had entered a forest, for a couple of years when I met Catherine, now my ex. If I had to choose between the two at the time, I think I would have chosen my neighbor. But what was I to do? I was merely friends with her, and she didn't want anything more. Catherine was a nice girl, I liked her. I don't think I loved her at that time. Maybe that came later, maybe not. Maybe I'm incapable of loving. What is love, anyway? Sven was silent. I remembered that after 3 months or so, I began again. That we had been together, Catherine was sleeping, and I sat next to her reading the following from Wordsworth. No, wait, it was actually from Yeats. The lover mourns for the loss of love. Pale brows, still hands, and dim hair. I had a beautiful friend, and dreamed that the old despair would end in love in the end. She looked in my heart one day, and saw your image was there. She has gone weeping away. Most of the time I just didn't care much whether she left or not. I felt trapped, I guess. In a way it was a relief when she broke off with me after 8 months or so. Strangely enough, when I was walking home I wanted to do the jump that a guy in Dancing in the Rain does when he's happy. It seems like it was a good thing it ended then, Sven observed. But I was devastated after she left. I wanted her back badly, but she would barely speak to me. Maybe I idealized the whole thing after the breakup, I don't know. It's also a terrible thing to spend almost every day with a person for about half a year and then suddenly not speak at all. That was a lonely time after the break. I can't imagine how it would be like to separate after say 10 years. I'd rather die than live through that. And now it's weird, I'm sure Freud would have a field day with the fact that I didn't care much for big tits when we were together. But after we had broken up, I suddenly developed a fetish for big boobs. Fuck my life, man. And you're not in a very good position to understand this. You fuck way more girls than I have, yet you never had a girlfriend. That's kinda strange. Why is it you never had a girlfriend, Sven? I don't know, but hey, you're the one who is unhappy and want to kill yourself. We should stick to your life story. This is not about me. We both became silent and reluctant to continue the conversation. For a while we just walked and looked at the forest. Sven, who had better vision than me, saw a squirrel, but despite his aid, I was, alas, not able to perceive the little furry creature. That was a shame, since I rather liked squirrels. You know, we used to live in the trees once, just like the squirrels do now, I said. Oh, don't start with that crap again. Of course I know we used to live in the trees. And you can live in a tree if you want now, without suffocating or freezing to death, Sven said, cutting my philosophical musings short. We came to a large rotten tree next to which a sign was erected by the Danish government. It explained that it was indeed alright that a dead, rotten tree was here. Decay was necessary for the health of the ecological system of the forest. Some creatures require rotten trunks to live in, the sign explained. I imagined that the sign had been set up because of an ordinary couple from Hirtshals, let's call them Mr. and Mrs. Smith, who both shared in the distinction of achieving the highest level of petit bourgeois mediocrity, walking in this forest sometime in the past. Keeping to the well-trodden and broad paths, they both found satisfaction in observing nature at a distance. They walked past the large immobile trees and heard a few birds singing not too loudly. Perhaps they too saw a squirrel. Their slumber, however, was disturbed when they arrived at this very spot. Their puzzlement at the sight of the decaying tree turned to a vague feeling of dread and anxiety. Thoughts of mortality pressed upon them. "Consider me," the tree whispered to them. "One day you'll be such a one as I am, and the worms will eat your flesh too." They eventually managed to quell their rising existential crisis by turning their fright to anger and indignation. Why, they asked each other, have the authorities not removed this blood on our beautiful forest? "I pay over half my hard-earned money in taxes, and they can't even remove this trash," Mr. Smith muttered angrily, while Mrs. Smith was too indignant to be capable of speech. When they got home, the first thing they did was call the administration of Hirtshals, and then hurl abuses at the first person that answered the phone. Afterwards they wrote a venomous letter to the mayor, demanding that something be done. And that was how it came to be that such a sign was erected. Could also just have said, "Don't panic, everything is alright," and it would have fulfilled the same function. Perhaps they even tried to burn down the tree, after the local authorities had proved themselves unwilling to intervene in the matter. But since the tree was still healthy, or rather in a state of healthy disintegration, their devious machinations must have been discovered and their purpose thwarted. And now, this very moment, they plot their revenge on the tree from a prison, or perhaps from a madhouse. "Do you hear something?" Sven said, rousing me from my fanciful conjectures. "I hear crying from far away." I listened, and did indeed hear a low sort of wail some distance away. The crying grew louder. "It sounds like a child crying," I said, "and it's coming this way." "Oh shit, what are we going to do?" Sven said anxiously. "What do you mean, what are we going to do? We should go investigate and figure out what is the matter." "Are you crazy? How do you think it would look if someone sees us out in the middle of a forest with a crying child? They would think we kidnapped it. This is not good, man." "What are you talking about? Nobody is going to think we kidnapped the child. The kid probably just wandered too far away from his parents. We should help it, and we'll be heroes, not villains." We saw a small figure rubbing her eyes with snot running down her nose. The child was coming our way. I was about to go towards her to ask what was the matter, when Sven grabbed my arm. "We are not getting involved. People will think we are pedophiles if they see us talking to a little kid. And imagine if she wanted to hold my hand. Jesus, that would be a straight ticket to jail." "You're being ridiculous right now. I'm going to..." But before I could finish my sentence, Sven had twisted my arm behind my back and thrown me to the ground. He was lying on top of me and held a hand over my mouth. "Shut up," he whispered to me. "She will hear us. Just let her pass and we can walk the other way. She will find someone sooner or later, I'm sure." It was too late, however, since the kid had already spotted us. She ceased crying and walked towards us. We were lying covered behind a bush, so the kid must have seen us while we were still standing. Sven was muttering something I couldn't hear, and he was sweating and very agitated. I had never seen my brother like this, and was astonished at his panic. I tried to free myself from my brother's grasp, but he was bigger and stronger than me. "Is someone there?" the child asked. We were silent. "Hello? Are you hiding? Why are you hiding?" The kid started to come closer. When she was almost at the bush, Sven suddenly sprang up and started to scream and swing his arms wildly about. The child was mortified and began to cry again while running away from us as fast as he possibly could. "Phew, that was a close one," Sven said when she was out of sight. I was astonished at my brother's behavior. At first I simply didn't know what to say to him. I wanted to pursue the child and console her, but Sven convinced me not to. "If you follow her now, she will flee from you, and imagine how that's going to look like, you chasing after a small terrified child in the forest." So we started walking briskly in the opposite direction. Sven attempted to hide the fact that he was shaken by the episode by trying to whistle. I told him to quit it and asked him, "What was that about? I have never seen you act so weird like that." "I'm not good with children." "You're not good with children? And that explains why you didn't want to help a crying girl lost in the forest? Not even that, but you actually scared her away." "Dude, I'm not good with children, I told you already," he said quickly, and then fell silent. I just looked at him while we walked, remaining silent as well. I was waiting for my brother to explain himself. "I don't know, I just can't handle children," he began after a while. "I feel like if I talk to a child, or smile at a child, or look at a child, people will think I'm a pedophile. So I just avoid them as much as possible. And I certainly don't want anything to do with a lost child. If we brought her to her parents, she could claim all sorts of things. I don't hate children, you know, but I don't love them either. I guess I kinda like children, as in I think they are funny, but as a man you can't say that at all, not without people looking at you like you are some kind of creep." We saw a large lake in the distance and started walking towards it. Sven seemed uncomfortable talking about this, but I just nodded and asked him to go on when he hesitated. "When I walked to the university," he began again, "I have to pass by a kindergarten or daycare or whatever they call it. One day a couple of years ago, when I passed by this daycare, a child said hello to me from the other side of the fence. I stopped and returned his greeting. Big mistake. He asked me who I was and what I was doing, so naturally I replied. I remember thinking he looked very funny in his little jumpsuit. But after we had only spoken for a couple of minutes, an adult from the daycare came out and looked at me very angrily. She asked me what in the world I thought I was doing. She was not satisfied when I explained that the child had said hello and I had merely responded. She told me to get lost and said I was a creep. When I protested my innocence, she pulled out her phone and started calling the cops. I got frightened and ran away as fast as possible, which probably made me look very suspect, now when I think back on it. Anyway, since then, I don't want to have anything to do with children. If they greet me, or look at me, or anything, I ignore them and go in the opposite direction." I had to suppress a smile while he was telling the story. I found it quite amusing, and now I could at least somewhat understand why he had acted like he did towards the crying child. "Better safe than suspect, I guess," I said, daring to smile at my brother now. He didn't smile back, but merely shrugged his shoulders. "You know how our father was thrilled at the fact that I, his firstborn, was a son? And when you turned out to be male as well, he was overjoyed. I'd always thought it was just because that as a man he preferred sons to carry on his name and so on. But if I ever have kids, and I'm not entirely sure I will, I would prefer boys over girls. I'm not sure I would be able to embrace my own daughter without it being awkward. I imagine if she wanted to sit on my lap. I'm afraid that I will emotionally distance myself from her and try to avoid any physical contact, just because people might think or accuse one of all sorts of things. You can't deprive your own child of normal physical contact, such as an embrace. That would be to neglect a basic part of parenting, and in my opinion it would border on abuse," I said. I know, but even knowing that, I'm not sure I could comfort her like I'm supposed to. At least I could probably make my wife do all the diaper changing," he said half in jest. "Anyway, it just seems too weird for me if I have a daughter, and she grows up to be really stunning. Imagine when she becomes a grown woman, and she acquires a great set of tits and a nice smile. I, her own father, might be attracted to her. That's just too fucked up, man. I didn't know what to say to answer his fears or calm him. Ahead of us, a lake could be seen in the distance, so I changed the subject and suggested we go look at it. Chapter 7. I could tell you many things about this lake, but truly, there's nothing worthwhile about the lake. Let's forget it completely, and we will never mention the lake again. This whole chapter was a mistake, and I suggest you rip this page out of the book. If you never ripped a book apart, it's about time you do so. Books are not sacred, and it can be a lot more convenient to read it ripped apart, especially if it's a large tome. Do it. And when people ask you what part you liked best about Lazarus AFK, tell them it was this part where you were told to rip out the page. And if you're listening to this as an audiobook or reading it on a screen, then just imagine that you have the book in front of you, rubbing the crisp paper between your fingers, and then pretend that you pulled out the page. Well done, you are now a vandal, and from henceforth you will be known as the Book Slayer. Chapter 8. Finally we were on the sea, heading to Norway, heading to the preacher's pulpit. Finally we had left this country so lacking in practical and convenient ways to kill oneself. Contrary to the advice of the best authority, we were sailing as passengers. But before we had embarked on the ship, something strange happened in the harbor. I had forgotten that Sven in no way liked sailing, that he in fact was deadly afraid of it for some reason. His way of coping with this was to get intoxicated before we embarked. To kill time before the ship arrived, I decided to join in his alcoholic debauchery and got a little tipsy myself. After a couple of drinks, we went tottering along to the ship, ready for our odyssey to truly begin. But before going on the ship, we were accosted by a strange old man. Or maybe it was just our intoxicated brains imagining things, though he did seem very real at the time. The damp weather had turned into afternoon fog, which enveloped the land. You could hardly see more than 10 meters in front of you. We had been at the location where the ship lay at anchor previously, however, so it wasn't too difficult to find even though we were a little tipsy. But before we reached the ship, an old hoary man suddenly appeared before us. His presence was like an apparition materializing from the fog. He just stood still, observing us. Sven ignored him and proceeded to walk by him, but his fixed gaze caught my attention, and I stopped and met his gaze. "Hello there, old man," I said. He smiled at me but said nothing. "How are you doing today?" I continued. Fine, I can't complain. And how are you?" he said in a calm, dignified manner. Sven had noticed my absence and had walked back to listen to our conversation. He stood looking at the old man with an insolent smile. "Well, I'm fine, just fine as well," I lied. "We are both very good, in fact." He looked at me with some concern in his eyes. "Tell me, young man, something seems to be wrong with you. You were shaking your head while saying you were fine, and I see much sadness and confusion in your eyes. So I will ask again, are you all right?" I had not been aware that I had been shaking my head while pronouncing my well-being. It had a profound impact on my emotions that he had been able to see through my disguise. I decided to tell him the truth. "Well, in fact, I'm not all right, but soon I will be. I'm on my way to Norway to the preacher's pulpit to kill myself." He seemed taken aback for a moment, but then he looked at me with a mixture of sadness and pity. "Well, it is the second best option," he said after a pause. "What do you mean it's the second best option?" Sven said. "It's a terrible thing to do, killing yourself over a few issues in your life." "What is the best option?" I said, ignoring Sven. "Not to be born at all. Few are so lucky," the old man replied and burst out in a frightful hollow laughter. "Oh great, a pessimistic old fool, just what we needed right now. Go away, old man, we have a ship to catch. Go be old and bitter somewhere else," Sven said. The stranger turned his gaze away from me and fixed it on Sven. "And what about you? Are you also going to Norway to kill yourself?" "No, I'm going to prevent my little brother from doing so. And I'm not surprised by you saying such depressive things. You are so old you practically have one foot in the grave." "Oh, so you're going to prevent what will be? We're all going to die. Why not let him decide himself when it's going to happen? And why don't you kill yourself?" "I think I know why. In your eyes I see nothing but ignorance, nothing but blank superficiality. All surface. You're probably too stupid to realize that you should kill yourself." "I've had enough of this old man, Lazarus," and saying that, my brother hurriedly walked away from us. I didn't particularly like the old man myself, so I quickly followed my brother. It didn't take long before we lost sight of the old man in the fog, but after we had almost reached the ship, he suddenly appeared again. He just stood there, grinning and looking old. "Get away from us, you creep," my brother nearly shouted. Sven was quite agitated now. You know who I am? I am you. In a moment you will be such as I am, and then nothing. I have accepted that fate, and your brother has embraced it. Are you even aware of the future? Do you still have immortality in your heart? I think you do. What is your name? Fuck off, that doesn't concern you, Sven replied. Alright then, you are the nameless one, which is more fitting than the random, insignificant name your parents gave you. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Have you ever thought about the meaning of that? I think not. In a few years you will be nothing but a bag for worms. Sven started to move aggressively towards him, but I managed to interpose myself between the two and restrain Sven. When I turned to address the old man and ask him politely to stop talking and go away, he had already vanished. Sven seemed quite shaken and lost in thought. Don't worry, man, he's just an old creepy drunk fool who has nothing better to do than hang out in the harbor and act like he has some profound message. We all know the fate of our bodies, and I'm sure you have come to grips with your mortality as well. Hell, I think I had that moment when I was 12 or so. That was a dark night. Sven didn't respond and seemed quite gloomy and dejected. He remained silent, and all he did was drink a couple of more beers before we finally embarked on the ship. Chapter 9. Talata, Talata, the sea, the sea. Who were these two souls who had just embarked from their father's homeland? They couldn't be more different, despite being brothers. If apples do not fall far from the tree, these must then surely have fallen on the opposite sides. One of them had chosen to listen to the voices of his ancestors, or perhaps circumstances beyond his control had led him to such a folly. From all manner of life they had spoken to him, this one worshipping his one true God, that one seeking firmness by doubting everything, and some seeking something that his ancestors once possessed, but which mankind seemed to have lost now. The din of voices had reverberated in his head, countless ways to live had been heard, and in the multitude of values everything had lost value for him. And so he simply sought oblivion by immersing himself in complete distraction, Dota being his favorite and only drug of choice. So why didn't he stay immersed in his distraction? Because when the pain got too severe, he had to stop. He could no longer forget his own self, his being in the world. And so he sought to flee from himself in other things for a while, such as books and Game of Thrones. When he got better after a while, he had forgotten the pain, and could return to his favorite form of oblivion, and the cycle would repeat. The other brother had not went beyond good and evil. The voices he listened to were those of his contemporaries. To him the ancestors did not speak. The dead was dead, and what remained of their works for him was not in words, but built in stone. He is able to act in the world, to say this is good and that is bad. The tide of the living sweeps him along in their currents, while the little brother wallows in the pools of the dead. If a spirit had come to both of them in the night and told them that this life they lead, this exact life, would repeat on an infinite amount of times, which one of them would gnash his teeth the least? Or perhaps one of them would rejoice? But if the spirit came to the younger and offered to erase all the supposed wisdom he had heard from his ancestors, would he not be tempted to accept the offer? Behold now the two brothers standing at the railing, looking out on the seemingly infinite expanse of ocean, one of them looking at rosy-fingered evening, the other the setting of the sun. Sven was still in a gloomy mood, and looked with melancholy eyes at the fading sun. Soon darkness will descend once more upon the waters, I said, but it seems to already have descended upon you, brother. Did the old man rouse you from your dogmatic slumber, or did my sinister purpose finally start to affect your mood? Sven did not say anything, but just kept staring out over the waters. We were not alone on the deck of the ship. Several other passengers stood by the railing to watch the sunset. Sven didn't seem to notice them at all, and while still looking out at the sea he said, "Perhaps I should kill myself too." He said it loudly, without paying any attention to his surroundings, and several passengers cast curious eyes at us. "Oh, brother," I said, trying to reprove him in a jocular fashion. "I thought you said that my reasons for killing myself are personal, and all my philosophical musings are merely ways to distract from my own misfortunes. If that is so, I can have every reason for killing myself, and you none. You don't know me, you act like you do. Just because you read more than me, you think you got me all figured out. Think I'm an idiot, don't you? That I don't think about life and all that stuff. Things like that, you know. But I do." "Damn right, I think you're an idiot if you want to kill yourself as well. But fine, I'll play along. Why do you now all of a sudden want to kill yourself? You seemed very happy when I met you yesterday, before you came under the shadow of my clouds." I don't know. I've usually tried to not think about it too much, but sometimes life just seems pointless. I'm going to die soon anyway. Why does it matter if I end it myself sooner rather than later? Is this some kind of trick? Are you saying that you want to commit suicide as well, so I will be forced to go back now to save you? That's not going to work. Anyway, you're not the type. You would rather suffer 1,000 slings and arrows of outrageous fortune than end your own life. I'm the only one of us who is capable of taking arms against a sea of troubles, though I'm not sure that is a good thing or not. If I lose you, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. You're my only brother, after all. What about we just go back? When we land in Norway, we take the next ship home, or we fly home if that is faster. It's not too late, you just started life. Why not live it a little longer? I didn't respond to his plea, but just stared out over the sea at the sunset. Glancing around us, I noticed that a person had moved closer to us, and might have overheard what we had been discussing. I didn't really care if she heard or not, so I chose to not pay her any attention. You know, there's a character in Dota who is also called Sven. He's a strong knight, not too clever, but a fighter. It's a fitting name for you. I think some people have a constitution that forbids them to develop certain vices or habits. For example, I can control my drinking, hold my liquor as they say, and after a few drinks I don't feel the need at all to go on. Others can't simply take a few drinks. Instead they end up so drunk they piss themselves. I believe you have a constitution that makes you immune to suicide, no matter how bad things get for you. You shouldn't have come on this trip, you know. I did try to prevent it, but you were simply too stubborn. I had no choice. You are my brother after all. He held the railing tight with both hands and turned his head to look at me. What about your name? What significance can you get out of that? You told me once it was from the Bible, but I can't remember who it was. Lazarus died and got raised from the dead. Oh right, Jesus raised him. So perhaps you will jump and rise again after a couple of days, he laughed. Yeah, that might happen, if we had not killed God. Anyways, the name is fitting in a sense. Let me tell you my own version of the story about Lazarus. There was this guy called Lazarus, and he died of some illness or another. Jesus was called to heal him while Lazarus was still sick, but for some reason he didn't show up until Lazarus had already died. When Jesus finally showed up, Lazarus had already been buried for 4 days. Jesus wouldn't let that hinder him though, and realizing that he probably should have saved Lazarus while he was sick, he decided to resurrect him from the grave. So to the horror of the whole village, Lazarus came back. It didn't quite seem right, and the smell of death and decay would not leave him. But being alive again, he had a family to feed, so he resumed his trade as a carpenter. But the other villagers were creeped out by seeing this formerly dead man walking around, and after a couple of weeks they stoned him to death. When Jesus heard about this, he got very angry. How dare these blind, stumbling children interfere in God's work, he said. So he came back and resurrected Lazarus, this time after he had been a week in the grave. And so it was continued for a while. Each time Lazarus was brought back, he became more and more ghoulish, and each time it would take longer for Jesus to bring Lazarus back. It soon came to a point that the moment Jesus had left the village after bringing Lazarus back, the villagers would instantly stone him. Lazarus felt worse every time he was brought back to life, and he begged Jesus to stop resurrecting him, but to no avail. But they finally had enough of this cycle of Lazarus, and with Lazarus' consent, they burned him and scattered his ashes to the wind. When Jesus came back after a month to check up on Lazarus, Lazarus was nowhere to be found. What did Jesus do then? Sven asked. What he did? Perhaps nothing. But God burned the whole village and scattered its ashes to the wind, and that was the end of that village. And what happened to Lazarus? Who knows? Maybe Jesus managed to bring him back again from clay or something. Maybe he rests in hell, or maybe he's nothing but atoms now, scattered in 1,000 directions. Cool story, bro, Sven said. Fuck you. I'm just kidding, you know I love to say that. It was a pretty good story, or I guess it's a kind of parable. Well, the point is that I'm like Lazarus. You could say that I've been in a Lazarus cycle these past years. I die, that is I don't feel like living anymore, but somehow after a while I'm called back to living. Not sure exactly what it is that calls me back, but it's taken longer and longer for it to happen. At first my depression only lasted a couple of days, and after a while it would last weeks. So why kill yourself now if you always resurrect after a while? The thing is, this time the resurrection has not come. Go on, guess how long I felt like killing myself this time. I don't know, a couple of months? 8 months and 12 days. Damn, that's a long time. Yes, and I see no salvation inside. Seems like my faith in life has been burned and scattered to the winds. I'm stuck in the cycle now, stuck in the part where I don't want to live. There's only one way to break it. I have made my choice, and you won't prevent it. It would be cruel of you. I looked around me and saw that the woman was still standing close to us, and definitely listening to what I was saying. I looked her straight into her eyes, and she reddened and looked away from us. Enough of this shit already, I said. I think we have discussed it enough. It's only the deed that remains now. I recalled the last time I slept in a ship. That was while sailing with the whole family. I don't remember where to, however. Oh yeah, I remember sleeping in a little cabin together. I think you were 10 years old or so at the time, my brother said. I remember being scared shitless, I reminisced, thinking that another kid we had traded Pokemon cards with would come down to our cabin and murder us. Do you remember the kid you traded Pokemon cards with on the ship? Sven smiled. Yeah, I remember. It was the time I traded the Golden Zapdos card. What an idiot that boy was. I just gave him 20 or so trash cards, basically worthless, and he gave me one of the rarest cards you could have at that time. We continued to reminisce about how we had been excellent little traders in our quest to catch them all. We had not eaten for a while, but I had brought some snacks that I now offered my brother. He accepted the bag, but instead of reaching his hand down to grab some of the various nuts like a normal person, he grabbed at both sides of the bag with his hands and proceeded to push a handful of nuts to the top. Once the nuts was at the mouth of the bag, he put his own mouth down towards it and gobbled up the nuts. I stared at him in astonishment. Once he started to repeat the whole process, I yanked the bag away from him, asking him what exactly he thought he was doing. I'm eating the nuts. My hands are dirty and full of germs after touching the railing. I don't want to touch the nuts with my hands. He tried to grab the bag again, but I was quicker and got it out of his reach. He looked at me sullenly. Hey, give it back. I barely got any nuts at all. You can have as many as you like, but only if you eat like a normal person. You look like a fool eating like that. I grinned and added, You bring shame on our family eating like that in front of strangers, brother. Hey, fuck you. I don't want to get sick. You won't get sick from your own damn hands. I put the bag near him, opening it and holding it firm in both hands. Here, go ahead and have as many as you like. You just got to reach for them. Sven looked at me and then down at the bag. After a brief hesitation, he put down his hand and brought up a fistful of nuts. You know what these nuts are good for now? He said, a strange smile on his lips. Fodder for the fishes. And saying so, he threw the nuts out in the dark waters. Hey, I paid for those, asshole. Fuck you, man. I don't see why it is any of your concern how I eat them. I've been nothing but kind to you on this trip, so why do you have to treat me like this? No, not just this trip. I've been a good big brother my whole life, and now you chastise me for not wanting to get sick eating some stupid nuts. You should have a little gratitude, little brother. I never wanted you to come on this trip, and you are overestimating your worth as a big brother. Sure, you never beat me or was particularly mean to me, but you never seemed to care much when I had problems or had a rough time. When I started using all my time in front of the screen, playing World of Warcraft, what did you do? Just the same as mom and dad. You condemned it and took their side. In calmer, more reflective moments, I didn't really want to blame my brother for the past. He was not guilty or accountable for my misspent youth, but a hidden anger had suddenly been aroused. You never came into my room and talked to me about the game, or showed any interest in what completely engulfed me. You just stayed away, not even deigning to pay any attention to my online activities. When I fought with our parents about my time spent with the game, whose side did you always take? Their side. So instead of it being 1 against 2 with a neutral observer, it became 1 against 3. You know, every time I came out of my room, the issue of me spending too much time on the computer hung in the air like poisonous fog. The atmosphere was toxic outside my room. So no wonder I chose to spend as much time as I possibly could, isolated in front of the screen. I hated going AFK. AFK, my brother asked? Away from keyboard. The best year in my life was playing vanilla World of Warcraft when I was 14 years old. I'm not sure if that is a sad fact about my life. It probably is. I screamed when I was holding the game in my hands the first day of its release, and I didn't do much else than play and go to school the first year of its release. I remember spending the last months before the game was released reading about the game as much as possible and trying to decide what name that I should choose for my character. I made a list, and I remember that at one point I thought Excavation would be a pretty cool name. That was before I found out what it meant. LOL. The waves lashing against the ship seemed to have gotten bigger the last hour. It was so dark you could hardly see the water anymore. Before I had a computer in my own room, I continued. I had to sit in the living room playing. Nothing like seeing the frown on the face of our dad when he came home from a hard day's work and saw me perched in front of the screen. Or talking about some completely unrelated topic with our parents, having a pleasant and nice conversation, briefly letting in fresh air and pushing aside the fog. But it was only an illusion. The fog was there all the time, and suddenly one of them would interject. "We need to talk about your computer usage. You're spending way too much time on the computer." And then the crushing realization that I could not converse with our parents without the fog being there, choking me. No wonder I reluctantly came to dinner, ate quickly, and returned to my room as fast as possible. You know, I still attended school and got fine grades despite spending so much time on my game. But that didn't seem to matter. All that really mattered was how you all perceived how I was on the path to perdition, sitting every moment in front of the screen. All the negativity and nagging probably had the opposite effect of what you intended. It all just made me play more, since it was the only place I didn't have to deal with all the worrying and disappointed looks I got from you guys. You acted like I was a heroin addict, doomed and on my way to being an outcast. I took a handful of nuts and shoved them into my mouth, chewing them loudly, looking defiantly at my brother. "See," I said, mouth still full of nuts. "I'm eating nuts I took with my own hand, and I didn't die." When he opened his mouth to speak, a sudden irresistible impulse made me spit one of them at him. I must still have been a bit drunk to do such a rude and stupid thing. It flew straight into his mouth. He spit it out instantly, wiping his tongue irrationally at the sleeve of his jacket. He looked at me with fury in his eyes, and his hands rolled into a fist. He didn't strike me, however, but just looked at me. I could see him mastering his anger, and it subsided almost as quickly as it had arisen. Only the sound of the water slapping the sides of the ship and a few footsteps roaming around could be heard for a while. By now it was almost completely dark beyond the ship. "Perhaps you're right, and we handled your obsessiveness with gaming badly, probably hurting more than we helped," he said in a calm voice, no trace of reproach for my rather disgusting and rude behavior. His voice was primarily just sad. "But let's say you have children one day, and they decide to withdraw from pretty much everything and just spend all day in front of a screen. What would you do then? Should we have thrown your computer out of the window and burned it? Cut off your hand so you couldn't play anymore? Tell me what you think we should have done." I don't know what the correct response to it is, but it seems anything would have been better than the way you guys handled it, I said bitterly. "Well, you talk about me being a bad brother and all that, but do you think it was easy for me? You were the little brother, and every time something happened, guess who got the blame? Do you remember that time close to New Year's Eve when we were playing with fireworks and you hurt yourself? Of course you do. You lighted a piece and threw it up in the air, and it flew right down your neck and burned your skin black as charcoal. When you came crying to Mom, guess who father instantly grabbed and started shaking? That was how it was like being the big brother. And about me not showing any interest in the game that consumed you, well, perhaps I feared the same fate would befall me if I started to learn about your world of battle or whatever it's called. I had a period where I spent too much time on Football Manager, but when I realized how consuming it was, I quit it completely. You should have done the same, but I guess you couldn't. If I started to learn about your game, I could have been dragged into it as well. Anyway, all that is in the past, and you should be damn glad I'm here for you now. And no matter how much you spit at me, I'll stay until you drop this insane quest of yours. I think you owe me an apology for spitting at me." I quickly apologized to him for that little episode, though I did not recant my critique of his role as my big brother when I was younger. Yet I realized it didn't matter anymore. It was in the past, and soon past, future, and present would all be nothing to me. "I'm going to go down to my cabin and sleep now," my brother said. "But before I go, please promise me one thing." "What?" I asked. "Please don't throw yourself overboard tonight." "No worries. You know deliverance awaits at the preacher's pulpit." And saying so, I almost threw my whole bag of snacks into the ocean. However, I remembered my fellow fishes, distant kin, just in time, and decided to just empty the bag of nuts overboard and safely stored the plastic bag in my pocket. Chapter 10. We had reached Norway, the lost land of our ancestors, and firm ground was once again beneath our feet. Sven was not well, however, and as we sat in the bus driving us towards the end, he cursed me when he was not puking into the third brown bag he had acquired. I thought about pointing out that rubbing his tongue against his sleeve was probably what had made him sick, but wisely refrained from doing so. Sven had barely been well enough to speak to the policeman who had waited us when the ship arrived in the harbor. Apparently the nosy woman on the ship had overheard enough of our conversation to figure out that I meant to kill myself somewhere in Norway, and had decided to inform the cops. At first they thought it was some kind of suicide pact the two of us had made, but the woman corrected that assumption by making it clear that she overheard my brother trying to talk me out of doing it. I did my best to deny that I wanted to end my life, and told them that we were merely here to enjoy the scenery, but to no avail. The cops were about to drag me to the station, to either send me back home or to commit me to some institution or another I truly have no idea what they would have done. Probably called my parents, which would have sent them howling and wailing to pick up their lost son, casting them in the role of the saviors and protectors of a misguided child. What a sight that would have been. My mother would probably unknowingly, even to herself, have relished the opportunity to be a nurse to her son, being once more able to have an important and dominant role in her grown son's life. Rather die 1,000 deaths than have that happen. Sure, she can play a role, but not the lead. At first my brother was mostly silent when the cops questioned us, but when they were about to drag me off, he suddenly intervened. Instead of making them end my journey to nothingness, he basically told them we were just here to walk in the mountains, and that we had merely talked about a novel that I intended to write, nothing more. The woman had only heard us talk about a fictional character, which I wanted to ultimately have end up committing suicide, while my brother argued that the protagonist should not throw his life away in the end, should not make that final leap of despair. The cops were skeptical, but when they asked the woman whether or not she was sure we weren't just talking about a story, she became uncertain and could not tell for sure. So here we sat then, and would soon arrive within walking distance of my deliverance. When I asked why my brother had intervened, he merely shrugged and told me that it had to be my own decision not to end my own life. Nobody could or should decide that for me. I had not really thought much about what would happen to my brother after I had thrown myself from the pulpit. I began to pity him as I studied him carefully. He had finally stopped puking and now sat leaning his head against the pane and holding his forehead with his right hand. He looked as miserable as I had ever seen him, and any outsider would have guessed that he was the suicidal one here, not me. The bus stopped a few kilometers away from the preacher's pulpit, and a big sign informed us that we could expect a trip of about 2 hours from here to reach the cliff. The weather was damp and rather cold, and the sky was overcast with dull and grey clouds. A mist hung in the air, making it impossible to see far in the distance. Since the attraction is rather popular, I had expected a lot of people, but only a few had gotten off the bus, and it seemed that the weather had discouraged many would-be wanderers today. All the rest had already begun their ascent, yet we still lingered, alone amidst the beautiful barren desolation. Sven was sitting dejected on a rock, looking like a sullen child who had been dragged on this trip against his will by his parents. When I came closer to him, I could see that he was trying to suppress the tears from flowing down his cheeks. I had been half whistling a tune since we had gotten off the bus. I felt a strange sense of relaxation, as if my past and all my concerns were no longer anything that really mattered. Soon I would be flying, I thought, and then a quick dash against the rocks, and then nothing. The thought of my lifeless body lying against some rock, or in the water, was not a pleasant thought, however, and I did my best to banish it. For the living, death is no concern. For those no longer alive, death is no concern either. I wondered if it was all a mistake, if I should just put a smile on my face and tell my brother, "It was all a joke, haha, I got you," and then head back, return to life, and all that went with it. But there was really nothing for me in life, nothing but pain and boredom, I thought. I'm already dead. I have been dead for 8 months and 13 days. What does it matter if my body dies when my spirit is already dead? You are Lazarus, you shall resurrect. He is late, he allowed the sickness to come unto you, the sickness unto death. Forbear, and thou wilt come back, Lazarus. Thou wilt have a child, thou wilt have a wife. Life awaits you, Lazarus. But do this, and you are forever lost. Tears were beginning to well up in me, and I felt as if my legs were 2 thin pikes. I realized I was shaking. I grasped at a large rock near me and leaned against it. The voice of my brother caught my attention. Apparently he had been speaking for a while now. "Tell the truth to them, because I knew you would not do it," Sven was saying. "You can't do it. I would feel guilty. It would be as if I had murdered you myself. I can't face our parents if you do it. I will feel accountable, and they will feel like they have failed. You're about to make everyone you know miserable. Is that what you want?" He spoke in a hoarse, desperate voice, which was almost a whisper. Some of the words I could barely hear. While he was speaking, I had paid more attention to some birds chirping among some rocks, and there was also the soft sound of a stream not too far away. I looked at the dejected creature who was my brother, sitting on the rock as if he didn't have the strength to rise, as if he would remain there forever. "I'm going now, Sven. You don't have to come with me any longer. The bus will return in some hours. You have done your duty as a brother, and to be frank, I'm actually glad you followed me so far. The rest of the way I should go alone. I want to go alone, in fact." All my doubts were gone. I had arisen and stood towering over my brother. I felt like the ascent was nothing. Nothing but a beautiful walk in Gethsemane before I would do what I had come here to do. Sven struggled to his feet, in what looked like a considerable effort to be able just to stand. He still looked ashen, and I was wondering if he was going to puke again. "No, I won't allow you to go. My DNA is in you. You are half me. I won't allow you to die. It's not your choice to make," he said. I looked at him full of sadness. "It is, brother. It is my choice alone, and no one else can make that decision for me. I have chosen. You can tell them that I tripped and fell up here, that it was an accident, though I prefer you tell the truth. It is misty up here, and I think some people on the bus thought better of going when they saw the weather conditions. You shouldn't follow me, it's not safe, and you seem to be drained of all your energy." I went closer to him and put forward my hand. "Goodbye, brother. This is none of your fault. No one's to blame for this. It's simply life and chance. This is the best that could happen to me." He didn't take my hand. "Lazarus, I beg you, do not do this. Give it another year, just one more year, and then if you still want to kill yourself, then do it. But not today, not now." I still held my hand forth towards him, waiting for him to grasp it one last time. "Take my hand now, or you will regret it. For your own sake, take my hand, and let this final parting be amicable." "So you have decided, have you, and nothing I can say will change your mind?" "I have chosen. I made my choice as soon as I set forth from Aarhus. This is the best that can happen to me." "Fine then, as you wish." He put out his hand and shook mine, but as he did so, his face changed. Instead of looking dejected, he now expressed a firm resolve. He tightened his hand around mine, and as I tried to pull away from him, he pulled my hands towards himself and spun me around. He had pulled my right hand around my back and held it twisted there, while he held my left arm against my stomach. He had seemed so feeble just moments before, and I could not understand where he had gotten the strength to do such a thing, nor could I believe what was happening. "Let go of me, you idiot," I hissed, though I did not struggle in his grasp, but remained passive. "No. I'm your brother, and you are clearly in a state of temporary insanity. We will wait for the bus to come back, and then we will return to Aarhus. If I have to drag you all the way, so be it. If anyone asks, I'll tell them all you are suicidal." "You barely have the strength to stand, and you think you can hold me here?" I said calmly. "I don't want to hurt you, so let go now. It's not your decision to make, and you know it." "I'm your brother," he repeated, "and you will not do this fully." His sentence ended abruptly as I in a quick motion twisted a little and then slammed my elbow in Sven's face. It connected with his nose with a crushing sound that made me instantly regret having hit so hard. He let go of me and fell down to his knees. He covered his nose with his hands, but the blood was seeping through his fingers. I'm sorry," I stammered as he held his hand forth towards me in bloody accusation. "But I have to go now. You will be fine." I pulled off my jacket and handed it to him. "Just stop the blood with this, and you will be fine. Goodbye, brother. Forgive me." I turned my back to him and started the ascent. As I was walking away from him, my brother began calling after me, telling me to wait, that I needed to see to his nose, that I couldn't just leave him, but I kept walking. In the end, all he shouted was just, "Lazarus! Lazarus! Lazarus!" It became fainter and fainter, and soon all I heard was the sound of the wind. The birds seemed to have all flown away, and I could not hear any water running either. I walked quickly towards my end, being firmly resolved to end this comedy and tragedy. I have lived, I told myself. I have tasted life, seen what it has to offer. I have drunk from the cup of life, but now it's time to put the cup away. All men are mortal, it's only a matter of time. Why not end it willingly in the prime of life? What are men anyway but an ember out of the fire that quickly fades and becomes nothing? And so I told myself, and a myriad other reflections passed through my mind. I would die today, and that thought made me light-hearted. Yet I could still feel the flow of my tears, and I had to wipe my nose more than what was appropriate for a romantic suicide in the mountains. As I walked quickly up the mountain, I met a few people. Most of them were rather old, and some of them greeted me and seemed to want to exchange some pleasantries, but I merely nodded and walked past them. They were as the shades in the underworld at that moment, merely shadows of men whose life meant nothing to me, and who could say nothing of interest. What made me slow down my ascent, and even briefly pause, was the beauty of the mountains. Sometimes the close fog would clear away, and the view would be like nothing in this world. Mountains half enveloped in mist were to be seen far away, and huge lakes were also visible in the horizon. It is only as an aesthetic phenomenon that existence and the world are eternally justified. Yet how long would I have to stay here until these sights also grew dull and common? I thought about my brother, and whether or not the boss had picked him up yet. Surely I didn't cause any real harm to him. Yet he shouldn't have tried to restrain me like that, It was his own fault. It was as if I could still hear him shouting on his knees, his face bloody and his blood-smeared hands held forth towards me. It was truly eerie how the sounds of "Lazarus! Lazarus! Lazarus!" suddenly seemed to actually echo faintly in the air. I stopped and listened, and as the sound of "Lazarus!" grew louder, I realized my bloody, stubborn brother had went after me. A brief smile appeared on my lips as I imagined him as Gollum, desperately scrambling after Frodo in search of his precious. It vanished into a frown, however, when I remembered that Gollum had died trying to prevent the destruction of what he held dear. Even if I killed myself and nothing would matter then, could not allow my brother to die for me. I quickened my pace with the resolute determination that when he reached the pulpit, I would not be there. There would be no accidents, no heroics at the top of the cliff that would result in 2 deaths instead of 1. Lazarus! As I finally reached the preacher's pulpit, I thought that if one was to die, this was certainly the place to do it. Mist obscured most of the view, yet it was still breathtaking, and there were less people here than I imagined. Lazarus! Lazarus! Most were standing in groups far away from the edge. It seemed that the mist discouraged them getting too far out on the cliff, and as I stepped out on the pulpit, they almost vanished from sight in the heavy fog. The edge was only a few steps away, yet when I was almost there, I suddenly stopped. Once I went over, once I flew, there would be no going back. And I wouldn't fly, I would just fall. Would I regret jumping over once I was in the air? Would I scream out in agony, gnash my teeth at my own folly, and wish that the earth was now not my deadliest foe, my nemesis? Or would I simply feel relief, glad that I had finally taken that fatal step? And could I even be sure that the fall would kill me? It should. It was more than 600 meters. Yet who knows what might happen? And even if I died, would it be instant? Or would I lie for hours on the rock in agony I had never before imagined, being I know not what kind of grotesque creature before finally expiring? Lazarus! Lazarus! Brother Lazarus! I wished I could have a death like Rorschach's, a man facing a god in the Antarctic waste, unwilling to change his fundamental beliefs, even if it means his destruction. The air so still, the snowflakes are flowing calmly in all directions. What are you waiting for? Do it! Do it! And then he just disintegrates, having been split asunder in a moment, probably feeling nothing, or if there was pain, only a brief flash. That must have been the most merciful murder ever. I wanted to watch the scene so badly now, yet I had no way to do it. That led me to think about all the things I would miss. But how pathetic would it be to live on for a few good movies a year, a few brief hours that would justify one's continued existence. My brother's shouts were very close now, but I could not bring myself to go over the edge. I couldn't even walk towards the edge. I decided to lie down on my belly, and then I proceeded to crawl towards it. As I finally reached the edge, I looked down, yet I could not see far, since the ground and lake were obscured by fog and mist. I heard a scream through the mist, and then my brother insisting that he was fine. He didn't need any help. Just stay away and leave me be, I heard my brother say angrily to someone. As I lay there looking down, feeling too craven to roll over and end it, I heard the sound of what I presumed to be my brother's footsteps. Lazarus, are you there? Please be there. I'm still here. The ground is wet and slippery. Don't walk to the edge. If you have to come here, please go down on your belly and crawl the rest of the way. He did as I told him, and was soon lying next to me. His nose had stopped flowing, and the blood had dried on his face, but his hands were badly cut, and they were bleeding now. He looked completely exhausted and utterly dejected, yet he managed a feeble smile when he greeted me. I expected you to be gone when I reached the top, Sven said. I'm still here, I said, sighing. I have to do it, you know. I have made my choice. I have to. It's the best for me. If I don't do it, I'll regret it. I wiped the tears away with my soiled arm. The dirt stung in my eyes. Don't do it, Lazarus. You can always do it, but once you go over the edge, there's no turning back. If you go over, there's no freedom. There's no resurrection from that kind of death. Come back with me, and just wait 1 year, and if you still want to kill yourself, then do it. I have told myself to wait since I was 15, I replied, and first thought about throwing myself in front of a train. I could keep waiting like so many others until I get old and die a natural death. Is it craven to kill yourself? Or is the true coward the one who can't follow what he knows to be the right path? I have made my choice. I scrambled to my feet. I now stood at the edge of the cliff, with nothing but air 600 meters below me. I could feel the gusts of wind swaying me back and forth. If I stood here long enough, a blast of wind would probably blow me over. I closed my eyes and stretched out my arms as far away from each other as possible, like someone trying to balance himself. As I stood there for what seemed like an eternity, all I heard were the wind and my brother whispering, "Please, Lazarus," and "brother." But nothing happened. It seemed there would be no divine intervention, no coup de grace from the elements to end my sufferings. But I had decided and had mustered the courage now to perform the final act. "Goodbye, Sven," I said, tears flowing freely. "Wait!" he shouted and took hold of my leg. "Don't try to stop me. You tried it already, and all you got was a bloody nose." "I won't try to stop you, but I promise you something before you jump." He stood up beside me, though he was so weak he was hardly able to stand. "It doesn't matter. It won't change anything. I am determined. You should look away." "This day, and only this day, I promise you," Sven said. "I promise you that, if you die today, I die as well." I turned and looked at him. The caked blood on his face seemed to confirm the truth of his resolution to do as he had vowed. This was no bluff. He was swaying in the wind and shivering. I shrugged, took his arm in mine, and made us both sit down on the ground. "I know you won't do it," I attempted. "Please just go back and leave me. Do me this kindness." But he stayed put and said nothing. I tried various entreaties and exhortations, made use of all my training in rhetoric and logic, yet nothing would avail to convince him to not emulate my suicide. All he said was, "Where you go, I go. You go over that cliff, so do I. You go home, so do I." I wasn't entirely sure if he would actually do it, but I didn't want to risk it. I didn't want him to die, and I couldn't let our parents lose both their sons. "Alright," I finally said, feeling a strange surge of relief. "I won't kill myself today, but that is all I promise. But I want something in return. This is the only time you will ever threaten me like that. Only this time. You will promise to never threaten to kill yourself if I kill myself again. That is, not if I kill myself again, but you can't threaten that again if I kill myself, or damn well you know what I mean. Will you promise me? This is the only time you will talk of suicide. It's not for the likes of you." "I promise," he said, showing a broad, bloody smile. He looked around, only now seeming to actually see the landscape around him. "It sure is beautiful here. Too bad it is so cloudy you can't see much. I suggested that we sit and wait for the sky to clear, since the weather changes quickly in the mountains. It seems to me it would be a fitting end to our journey if we could get a ray of sunshine or two," I said. And so we sat waiting, hoping for the sky to clear and for the sun to show itself. My feeling of relief had vanished, and I could feel sadness wash over me. I would keep my promise to Sven, yet I vowed to myself that I would be back here one day. My brother would not be with me then, and I would be alone. Then I would stand at the edge, and I would be able to make my own decision. I was not sure what would have happened without Sven here. I was both glad that he was with me, yet his presence irritated me, and I felt like I had been bullied into continued existence. I would be back here again, probably next year. If I had not resurrected at that time, or if I had resurrected and died again, I would be back here, alone. This concludes the reading of Lazarus AFK, written by Lasse Sagomelver, narrated by Lasse Sagomelver. If you would like to support me, you can do so by either getting a copy of the ebook on Amazon for a little under $4, or you can leave a review on Amazon. Thank you.